On behalf of our entire WWE family, we would simply like to say thank you and welcome you to WrestleMania!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio, and today we are looking at WrestleMania 37. Was it good? Was it bad? Now, an important note that I want to stress before we go any further into this, I am recording this right after each night of WrestleMania ends. So we'll go through night 1, then we'll go through night 2, and then we'll end it off with my overall thoughts on the Mania, along with my top 3 matches of the event. With this format, guys, if I'm done in 10 minutes, I'm done in 10 minutes. If it takes me an hour to get through this, then it takes me an hour. And I want, as the title suggests, I want to do this a little more off the cuff. Meaning the only scripting I have is basically the match card in the order that it was presented and who won each match, and that's pretty much it. So with that out of the way, guys, let's just get right into WrestleMania 37. Like I said, guys, we are going to start off with night 1. Now, this Mania was actually started off very, very interesting in the sense that for the first time in WrestleMania history, we actually had a weather delay. No joke, they had to delay WrestleMania by 30 to 45 minutes. I think the first match didn't start until 8:45. And I remember saying, like, the entire time, it's like, well, if they held WrestleMania in a closed arena, there would be absolutely no problems right now. But, you know, whatever, you know, at least they weren't paying for a pay-per-view company to air night 1. If they were, they would have been totally screwed because the last hour would have been cut. But I think this was like exclusive to Peacock this year, if I'm not mistaken. This year being 2021, in case if anyone is watching this sometime down the line. But with that weather delay out of the way, let's get right into the first match, and that was Bobby Lashley versus Drew McIntyre for the WWE Championship. And honestly, I thought that this was a bad way to open WrestleMania. Why the hell would you open it with a WWE Championship match? Why wouldn't you want this to be a main event of the night? You know, like one of the final 3 matches type of thing. And on top of that, it's like the match went for about, it was a standard championship match. It went for about 25-30 minutes. So it wasn't terribly executed. And it ended with no new champion getting crowned. But again, I think it was just in the wrong slot. It should not have been the first match to open WrestleMania. It should have been, you know, one of the final 3. And I'll get a little more into that at the very end because I need to get a little deeper to string some of this together. Then we have what was known as Tag Team Turmoil that immediately followed the WWE Championship match. Now, how Tag Team Turmoil worked out was the first 2 tag teams came out, and then it was an elimination each round. So once one tag team got eliminated, the next one came out, and then they went right into a match. It was a great idea, but it was terribly executed, and it had nothing to do with the fact that it was all women's tag teams. It was Naomi and Lana, which I actually remember Lana as the manager for Rusev back a few years ago. You also had Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke. I actually remember Mandy Rose from the last season of Tough Enough. I think that initially aired on the USA Network. It might have been WWE Network at the time, but I do remember that they did live shows on like USA a few years ago. I don't remember. I don't remember specifics. Then you had the Riot Squad, which honestly, I have not followed wrestling like weekly for the last like probably 5 years. So any wrestlers that debuted during that time, I probably have no idea who they are. Natalya and Tamina, both legacy wrestlers. Natalya being connected to the Hart family, which if you're a wrestling fan, you know who the Hart family is. And Tamina being Jimmy Snuka's daughter. And the funny thing is she even is using his finishing move. And then you have Carmella and Billie Kay, again, probably debuted within the last 4 or 5 years, so I have no idea who they were. And it's like, and the winners will face Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler for the Women's Tag Team Championship. The funniest part about that match, guys, no joke, the crowd was fucking quiet. Like almost the entire time of the match. The last time I remember a crowd being that quiet at a WrestleMania was Brock Lesnar versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 30. If you guys remember that match, for the vast majority of it, you could just hear a pin drop in the stadium. That's how quiet it was. And honestly, I think the crowd was... Now, I'm not going to speak for the crowd, but this was the tag team turmoil. This was the kind of match that honestly could have been handled at SmackDown. They didn't need to push it to WrestleMania at all. And I think that, and that was the biggest problem with the match. It was just out of place. So you start off with a championship match, and then you go to a match that honestly could have been handled on Friday Night SmackDown. So where do you go from here? Well, thank God it actually went to a really good match. It went to Cesaro versus Seth Rollins. And this match had a lot of really good build-up, in my opinion, from what I've watched of SmackDown. You know, it was kind of the classic, you know, how dare you embarrass the shit out of me, now I must defend my honor type of guy in Seth Rollins. I actually really liked Seth Rollins back when he, you know, back when he broke away from the Shield. I wasn't the biggest fan of the Shield. That was Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose. I think once he broke away, he started getting really good. And honestly, this was the kind of match, it did not matter who won. It was going to go down as a great match, you know, regardless. So you have to in order to understand the ending of the match, you have to understand the build up to it. In that on SmackDown, you know, Cesaro's finishing move is that he basically picks you up and he spins you in the ring. You know, that's been his finishing move for years. So he spun Seth Rollins in the ring on SmackDown like 22 times and, you know, quote unquote embarrassed him in front of the WWE Universe. How does the match end? Cesaro spins him around 23 times and then pins him. Almost like the perfect ending to that type of match. And I'll go as far as to say this, Cesaro versus Seth Rollins was the absolute best match of the night. And ironically, it was also the shortest match. Now, and I'm pegging it as the best match of the night because this, to me, felt like a WrestleMania match. You know, it felt like it did belong at a WrestleMania that, okay, we've been building to this for 2 months, and now we are going to settle this score once and for all. And sorry, but my monitors went to sleep on me. So next up, we have a Raw Tag Team Championship. That was the New Day minus Big E. So you only had Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods taking on AJ Styles and Omos. And this one did actually have a title change. You know, the New Day were the Raw Tag Team Champions. It went to AJ Styles and Omos. Again, this match was just kind of there. It didn't really do anything for me, and I'll actually get into that more going into night 2. I hate to have to push stuff like this off, but you know, I'm just gonna have to wait a little further down the line. Now, here's a match where, like, the placement of this match made absolutely no fucking sense. And that was, you know, Shane McMahon versus Braun Strowman in a steel cage. Like, right then and there, like, that sounds like this is a main event match, given the specialty nature of it. But no. After this, we've got 2 more matches to go. So, the actual match itself, Shane McMahon versus Braun Strowman, the build-up to it was beyond fucking stupid. It basically was... you had Braun Strowman basically go, Shane McMahon called me stupid and embarrassed me, and now I want to take him on and beat the piss out of him. Absolutely just stupid ass build up. But the match itself, I feel, works even with the shitty build up. because you did have some really good moments. You know, you had a really strong start when they were able to get a steel cage inside of not a steel cage, a steel chair, sorry. A steel chair inside of the cage. And then at one point, Shane going up to the top, ripping off the sheet metal, and even starting to use that as a weapon. So at least it did get it did get kind of hardcore in the beginning. But then the two best moments of that match was when, you know, Shane was like halfway out, and he starts waving like goodbye to Braun Strowman, and Braun Strowman literally just like rips that part of the cage off and drags Shane back into the match. That was actually a really good moment, but that was not the best moment of the match. The best moment of the match is by far the ending, when both Shane and Braun Strowman are standing on top of the cage, and Braun Strowman throws Shane all the way down to the ring, you know, to the canvas of the ring. Very similar to like Undertaker versus Mankind back in the late 90s. I mean, the only other steel cage match that I can think of that had a real epic moment like that was a match involving Jimmy Snuka, and I cannot for the life of me remember who he took on. But, you know, if you're a wrestling fan, you know the match where he went to the top of the steel cage and did the superfly off the top of that. You know, it was like 14 or 15 feet off the ground, and he did the superfly on his opponent that was still down in the ring. You know, you would think that, like, you know, that this is the kind of match like you would want at the end, because it's going to be really, really difficult to, you know, kind of match what they did. You know, how are you going to match a guy being pulled back into the steel cage by ripping one of the panels off completely, and then, you know, throwing that same guy off the very tippy top of the steel cage, basically ending the match? Well, they did, but before we go into the next match, they did finally do an official celebration for the 2020 Hall of Fame that they couldn't do last year because, you know, last year's WrestleMania, COVID had hit, and that like threw a wrench into their plans. So that's all that was, where it's like, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome out, like, you know, Bradshaw, the Bella Twins, anyone who was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame back in 2020. They do it at every WrestleMania. It's only like a few minutes long, and it's honestly not that bad. Then we get to the second to last match of the night, and this was the celebrity match, which, you know, there's always one of these at every WrestleMania. I think there's a couple that didn't include them, but they're always there. And the celebrity was Bad Bunny. Personally, I had never heard of him, but I don't follow the music scene anymore, so I don't care. It was Bad Bunny and Damian Priest versus The Miz and John Morrison. And I was actually shocked to hear that John Morrison was back in the WWE, because I remembered, like, he was let go like about 10 years ago, 10 years ago, so somewhere around there. And if any of you listening are fans of Survivor, John Morrison was on David versus Goliath that particular season. He actually, I think, was the second juror on that season, if I remember correctly. But anyway, it was a tag team match, and it was Bad Bunny and Damian Priest versus The Miz and John Morrison. There were no like special stipulations or anything. My thing with regards to celebrity matches at WrestleMania, it usually, like, the quality of the match comes down to how much is the celebrity getting involved with it. You know, meaning, how much training are they putting into it? Are they going to put in the bare minimum? Are they going to really go for it? You know, are they going to really go balls to the wall with it? You know, it's entirely out of your control, and these are kind of like throwaway matches. This one was actually one of the better ones that I have personally seen, because you had Bad Bunny, who, you know, supposedly is a lifelong fan of the WWE, and my God, was he going for it. You know, he was doing a lot of top rope moves, you know, a lot of stuff that celebrity matches like would not dare to go, because, oh my God, you know, because you could very easily break your neck if you have no idea what you're doing. But Bad Bunny props to him. He at least went for it, and he actually made the match quite memorable for that particular reason. So kudos to that guy. It doesn't live up to the steel cage match with Shane McMahon and Braun Strowman, but in terms of the celebrity match at WrestleMania, it was actually quite decent. Then we have the quote-unquote main event of the evening, and that was the Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair for the SmackDown Women's Championship. This did crown a new champion with Bianca Belair, and this honestly has the same problem as the Bad Bunny and as the tag team, Bad Bunny, Damian Priest versus The Miz and John Morrison. It could not live up to that steel cage match between Shane McMahon and Braun Strowman. The one part of the match that I remember, because I don't think that it was meant to happen, was Bianca Belair whipped her hair into Sasha Banks, and I remember that whip was so hard when her hair made contact with Sasha Banks, you could just hear the crack that was on there, and it's like, oof, ooh, she's gonna feel that one for quite a few days. And even after the match was done, when Sasha Banks is on the outside of the ring, you can clearly see the lash mark where Bianca's hair got her. And it was a lot more than just a lash, because she did draw some blood. So it's like, yeah, that one, I will give benefit of the doubt. It probably wasn't meant to be as hard, but heat of the moment. And this is the point I wanted to end on. Was for night one, I'm gonna wrap this up because I think I've been going out for almost 20 minutes. Let me check real quick. Yeah, almost about 20 minutes. So here's the point that I ultimately wanted to make with night one. Night one to me felt like just a complete mishmash of matches. We're gonna start off with the WWE Championship match. Then we're gonna go to a match that really didn't need to be there. Then we'll go to a WrestleMania match. Then we'll go to kind of an okay match. Then we'll go to a match that should have been the main event. But then we're going to go to a celebrity tag team match. And then we're going to end with another, a women's championship match. When in reality, what they should have done was they should have ended it. The final three matches of the night, it should have started with, Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair be the first one as the SmackDown Women's Championship. Have that be the third to final match of the night. Then have your WWE Championship match between Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre. And then end with the Shane McMahon versus Braun Strowman in the steel cage. Because like I said, with regards to that steel cage match, how are you going to top the two moments that I described earlier? The moment of Shane getting dragged back into the cage by Braun Strowman, ripping a panel off, ripping almost the entire panel of the cage off and dragging him back in. And then Braun Strowman, like a minute or two later, going up and throwing Shane McMahon off the top of the cage, and then, ending the match like 30 seconds later. No match was ever going to top that. And honestly, I feel like that hurt the perception of the Bad Bunny, Damian Priest versus the Miz and Morrison, as well as Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair, because no matter what anyone did in either of those matches, it was never going to live up to the epicness of that steel cage match. And before I start sounding like a broken record, guys, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sign off for the night. I will come back and I will record again for night two. So you guys should be hearing this on Monday, but I wanted this to be more raw and unedited, very much like how TMRP is. So yeah, I will come back for night two. Now let's talk about night two of WrestleMania. I am coming back like just a couple hours after WrestleMania 37 has finished. So let's talk about the very first match. That was Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton. I did say that name right. I didn't have a Elmer Fudd moment with the whole "I'm hunting wabbits." And, Orton won the match, surprise, surprise, but I'm watching the match the entire time thinking, why the hell was this not a Hell in a Cell match? And don't give me this, cockamamie bullshit excuse of, well, you can't store both the steel cage and a Hell in the Cell over the ring. It's just, the space-wise, it's not practical. Despite the fact that this is the first year that WrestleMania has taken on a 2-night format. So night 1 could have been a steel cage match. Night 2, you could have had a Hell in a Cell. The only difference is that the cell is a little bigger and it has a roof. Is really the only difference that, between a steel cage and a Hell in a Cell. But I figured that it should have been a steel cage match because that would have played into Bray Wyatt's character. If he's supposed to be the new face of fear, why not have a match type where Randy Orton can't quote unquote escape from? If he can't, because anyone can escape from a steel cage. That's the whole point to a steel cage match, is to try to escape the cage. But the point to a Hell in a Cell match is no interference and no way out. No possible way of escape. So I don't know. I think that was just too much of a missed opportunity for me. Then we get into the next match, and this is the Women's Tag Team Championship match. This is the Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler versus Tamina and Natalia, who won the Tag Team Turmoil the prior night. Just a spoiler alert, there was no change in the tag title. And personally, I feel like the match simply ran for too long. And I say that because Natalia definitely comes from the Hart family, and you can tell from the entrance theme, as some of you might already know. But like I said, if you debuted within the last 4 or 5 years, I probably have no idea who you are. And I had no idea that she was actually related to Jim Neidhart. So, and the reason I say that it ran for too long is because the Hart family were more of your technical wrestlers. So they always worked better in matches that were a little shorter or against other technical wrestlers, which Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax were not. So you drag out the match any longer than it needs to be, and it can very clearly show. I think had the match been around, 12 to 15 minutes from entrance to exit, I think it would have been better. And I'm going to touch more on that point in a little while. Because this plays into my overall thoughts on the Mania itself. Then we have Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn, where Kevin Owens wins. And I'm going to come right out here and say it. I do know who Sami Zayn is. And I love the fact that they made him totally look like Ted Kaczynski. And the whole idea of there's this grand conspiracy against him. And I have to pronounce it exactly like against, because Sami Zayn is totally fucking Canadian. And I'll say this, it's like, there are not enough wrestlers like Sami Zayn in the WWE right now. Guys that are just purely entertaining. And I think that the match between Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn worked just because Sami Zayn is so entertaining, you can't keep your eyes off the guy. And it was even funnier when you got Logan Paul in there, and Kevin Owens, thank God, that man deserves a goddamn medal for this, actually hit Logan Paul with a stunner. I wish he had gone a little more. I wish he had gotten him into a figure 4 leg lock or something, really make the bastard suffer. But we'll take what we can get, okay? Because fuck the Paul brothers. Logan is bad, but Jake is fucking worse. Then we have the U.S. Championship, and this was Riddle versus Sheamus. I have no idea who Riddle is, but I could not stand that motherfucker from the first second of his theme song when it goes, yeah, bro. And I remember I'm laying watching WrestleMania, and I'm like, I hate this motherfucker already. Anyone that goes, yeah, bro, automatically is, I want the other guy to kick their fucking ass so badly. I knew a couple guys like that in high school. I couldn't stand them then, and I can't stand these kind of people now. But it was so funny. He's riding to the ring with his cute little scooter, and oh god, picture a total dude, bruh, and that's all he was. like I said, probably debuted within the last year or so. No idea who he is, but I do know who Sheamus is, the Celtic Warrior. And I'm so glad that Sheamus, like, kicked the shit out of him and basically took his title belt. Because, like, thank God that he got him away from the frat bro. I mean, it will never, okay, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say this. Riddle is nowhere near as bad as Tyler Breeze was a few years ago when he debuted on NXT, where he had to come out. He was like total millennial with like the selfie stick. It's like, I can't fight this uggo. I'm too pretty. And that made me hate Tyler Breeze even more. I don't know if he's even still at WWE. Hell, with how big the roster is, who knows who's still there and who isn't. I know a lot of hardcore WWE fans probably know that, but like I said, I haven't followed him weekly for like the past, 4 or 5 years. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. Then we have the Nigerian drum fight between Big E and Apollo Crews for the Intercontinental Championship. It's basically a no disqualification match was all it was. And honestly, I feel like the problem with that match was it was too short. That should have been like a 45-minute match. If you're going to go no disqualification, you better fucking go for it. At least they were whacking each other with kendo sticks and, hitting each other with the gong. But still, you needed to go like that full 45 minutes to show how genuinely brutal the match was, because the build-up to it was that, it's one of the most brutal matches on earth. It doesn't stop until the guy is dead, so to speak. And then it only goes for maybe about 20-25 minutes. And, they've done no DQ matches at WrestleMania before that have gone for, 30-45 minutes, no holds barred. The only difference was this wasn't a Falls Count Anywhere. But I do remember a Falls Count Anywhere match lasting almost an hour, and that was actually pretty entertaining at the time. But still, and again, this ties into my overall thoughts on WrestleMania, and I'll get to that in just a few minutes. And then on night 2, like I said, on night 1, they had the Hall of Fame for the 2020 Hall of Fame celebration. So it makes sense that on night 2, they would have the 2021 Hall of Fame celebration, like, out comes Kane and Rob Van Dam and the Great Khali and all those guys that were inducted recently. And it's like, ladies and gentlemen, your, Hall of Fame class of 2021, so to speak. And that's really all it was. It was kind of like a formal salute if you didn't want to watch like the 2-hour induction ceremony. And then we get to the final 2 matches of the night, and I'm going to be honest, guys, I'm not really familiar with either wrestler. That's Asuka versus Rhea Ripley. I've heard of Asuka, but I've never heard of Rhea Ripley. And this one, I really feel like that they were trying way too hard to be taken seriously, if you know what I mean. Like, they were going in, like, really hard with the taunts, like how some of the male wrestlers do, where they'll get each other down, like, rubbing each other's faces. That's fine and all. That's part of pro wrestling. It's always been there. But, there does come a point where you really should knock it off and get back to just beating the crap out of each other, rather than, like, constantly, rubbing each other's faces and bitch slapping each other. At some point, it's like, all right, just hurry the fuck up and get back to beating the hell out of each other. That one, there was a new champion crowned, but like I said, I had no idea who Rhea Ripley even was, so I really didn't care. And then we get to the ultimate main event, and I did actually watch this build-up. That was the Universal Championship triple threat match between Roman Reigns, Edge, and Daniel Bryan. And yes, I do know who all 3 of those guys were. And the build-up to this match was great. Edge winning the Royal Rumble, earning whatever title shot he wanted. And then Daniel Bryan getting screwed at Fastlane. He got screwed out of the Universal Championship because Edge wanted to take on Roman Reigns. So then on SmackDown, they had the new stipulation that would be this triple threat at WrestleMania. Great. And the match actually started off pretty good. It was a no disqualification, triple threat match. So it's all like almost anything goes. We got like vintage Edge where we got a couple of concertos and, you know, a couple of spears. And I remember during the entire match, like, everyone was cheering for Edge and Daniel Bryan. And the match was really, really good, really, really captivating. Until the very end when Roman Reigns, like, retained the Universal Championship. And the entire time I'm sitting there just going, what the fuck were they thinking? Because you have a compelling story with Daniel Bryan in the sense that, you know, he was the guy that got screwed out of the belt. So if you want to create a new champion, you need to get the crowd behind him. What better way to do that than to screw the bastard out of the belt? Great. And then you also had a really good story with Edge where, you know, 10 years prior, he was just suddenly forced to retire after defending I think it was the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 27. And a week later, it just came out that, yeah, guys, the doctors ordered me that I have to retire. And, you know, the WWE at the time would not have had him defend the belt if he was just going to retire the very next week. And I do remember that time. That was one hell of a shockwave, and no one knew if he would ever be able to come back. And he came back, I think, last year at last year's Royal Rumble. So you already have a situation where if Daniel Bryan wins, I think some people would have been shocked, and they would have said that it diminishes the value of the Royal Rumble because Edge had won his shot fair and square. But I think it would have gone over. I think it would have gone over quite well given enough time. If Edge had won, that would have really gone over very well because now you have Edge that has now reclaimed his former glory. You know, he was forced to surrender the belt 10 years prior. He's now back and better than ever. But no, let's give it to the guy that has been constantly booed for the last, 5 or 6 fucking years. You know, ever since they broke up the Shield, that was Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, and Dean Ambrose. Seth Rollins really took off in popularity at the time. I do remember that. Dean Ambrose kind of fell by the wayside. I think he's with AEW now. And then you have Roman Reigns where Vince really wants him to be the next John Cena. He wants him to be the next face of the company. But the guy constantly gets fucking booed. And at some point you're just thinking Vince, read the goddamn room. Nobody likes Roman Reigns. And this is a real problem if you want to put him over as a champion, is that if the crowd can't get behind him, then he's not a good champion. He's clearly not the face of the company right now. You know, give him some more time in developmental. Hell, I think it's a little too late for Roman Reigns at this point because, you know, if people are still booing him to this day, regardless if he's a babyface or a heel, then all that means is he's never going to go over with the audience at large. So the fact that Roman Reigns won the match, before I tangent on it for any longer than I need to, that retroactively ruined the entire main event and basically made the build-up just that much more shitty. You know, it's like you had this build-up for a great match where you could have 2 winners walk away, and either one, you know, it would be a great, WrestleMania main event, but no, you give it to the one guy who's gonna ruin it all. And that's really a damn shame. Because I was enjoying that match, like I said, up until the very, very end. Now I'm going to discuss my overall thoughts on WrestleMania itself now that all is said and done. And one of my big problems with it is it was way too championship heavy. 8 out of the 14 matches were championship matches. Meaning that, none of the championship matches really matter. You know, I remember I watched WrestleMania 29 for the first time a couple years ago, and I only remember there were only 2 or 3 championship matches total of WrestleMania 29. And, you had your big ones, you had your WWE Championship. I think you had the Universal one too. But again, if over 50% of your match card is nothing but championship matches, then it doesn't make the championship matches like all that special, because now, you know, you have like the Raw Women's Championship match, the SmackDown Women's Championship match, the WWE Championship match, the Universal Championship match, the Intercontinental Championship match, just on and on and on and on and on. Who fucking cares? You know, why can't you handle that at a place like Night of Champions? That's what Night of Champions used to be. It used to be nothing, like almost nothing but championship matches. And to go off onto the build-up, you know, the build-up to the main event was great. Like I said, you know, going all the way back to the Royal Rumble. But the outcome fucking sucked. You know, which ruins the main event entirely, which could retroactively, you know, hurt WrestleMania overall. And honestly, I thought that the whole pay-per-view was just way too long for its own good. Now, without the weather delay, I don't blame them at all for that. You know, they had a delay because there was apparently there was lightning in the area, so they delayed it by 30, 45 minutes. Even without the weather delay, it still went for about 5.5 hours. Now, I know that WrestleMania is typically the longest pay-per-view, you know, going like 3.5, almost 4 hours. But 5.5 hours of nothing but wrestling simply is just way too fucking long. I'll go back to WrestleMania 29 when I watched that a couple years ago. That pay-per-view was maybe 3.5 hours, 3 hours and 40 minutes, and it only had 2 less matches. It had 12 matches compared to 14. And yet somehow it was almost 2 hours shorter. So what that tells me is that a lot of these matches were dragged out for length. And this goes back to my problem with the Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler versus Natalya and Tamina. You know, they had to fill out almost like 25, 30 minutes, when in reality that match should have probably been 15 minutes at the most. You know, another match like Asuka versus Rhea Ripley honestly should have probably been the same way. Should have maybe been 15 minutes at the most, but no, we have to drag this out for time. And you know, I feel like, you know, with WrestleMania, the only true like WrestleMania style match that we even got this year, the only two that we really got were Cesaro versus Seth Rollins and Shane McMahon versus Braun Strowman on night 1. So in reality, they basically blew their load way too early, because all their best matches were on night 1. And speaking of the best matches, like I said in the very beginning, I'm going to rank my top 3, and it was actually really hard to find a third favorite, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to outright say it. The best match of WrestleMania was Cesaro versus Seth Rollins. And ironically, that match was actually the shortest one of all of WrestleMania. And it actually felt like a WrestleMania match. It had great build-up prior, and the payoff was fucking great. When you had Cesaro, instead of spinning Seth Rollins around 22 times in the middle of the ring like he did on SmackDown a couple months prior, he spun him around 23 times, then pinned him. You know, ultimate WrestleMania moment. You know, it felt like a match that could only work at WrestleMania. The second best match of WrestleMania, in my opinion, was Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn, and largely that's just because I feel like Sami Zayn is so entertaining. You know, even if everybody boos him, because, you know, I take it he's now a heel instead of a babyface, but it doesn't matter. The guy is entertaining as hell. You know, you can't take your eyes off of him, and and you know, the fact that they stunned Logan Paul at the end, such a great moment. Now, I wish that they would do that to his brother Jake as well, but that's neither here nor there. And the third best match of the entire pay-per-view was Shane McMahon versus Braun Strowman. You all know I had to put that on the top 3, really for 2 moments in the match entirely. And that was Braun Strowman ripping Shane back into the ring, you know, as he's halfway down outside the cage, by ripping off an entire panel, dragging him back in. And then about a minute later, going up to the top of the cage and then throwing Shane all the way down to the bottom of the ring. You know, like that right there, when they talk about WrestleMania moments, that was, you know, those 2 moments in particular were WrestleMania moments. And guys, I'm going to go ahead and end it right here, because I have basically gone on for as long as I need to go. this was a special video I wanted to make because I just got Peacock back and I was able to watch WrestleMania. I am thinking about reviewing the other pay-per-views. So the next one coming up, I think, is Backlash in mid-May. So as you guys all know by this point, I am terrible at signing off. So I will see all of you guys next time.